Welcome back to That's Runnable. I'm Tommy. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Really grateful for you coming along and pressing play. If you're running right now, I just want to say I'm proud of you because I know what it takes. I know what it takes to work on yourself, to care for yourself. So if you're not proud of yourself, I'm proud of you. You're either pounding the pavements or pounding the trails. You're out there, you're working on yourself. And that is a good thing. If it's your first time here, That's Runnable is built on the mantra, run the runnable. We focus on what's doable. We focus on what we can control and we don't get overwhelmed by what we can't. And we run the runnable. Today we're talking about dreaming big, setting big goals and the value it has. But first, just a couple of things. I'm going to be running my first 100 miler next year. It's a big goal of mine, something that I have wanted to achieve for many years now and has driven me to achieve goals that I already didn't think I was capable of doing. I'm going to be running Devil's Gulch out in the Eastern Cascades in Washington State. It's in July next year and you have the opportunity to join with a little 10% discount. I'd love you to join me. We're going to have a little bit of a get together the night before, and this is a race that is supposed to be extremely challenging. It's a new course and promises to be just as hard as some of the famous North American races you might know quite well, like Hard Rock, Western States. Very difficult races, and this is up there. So it's going to be a big challenge for me, and I'm excited and grateful for Evergreen Trails for inviting me along. And I hope you can join me. And maybe if you want to just go to the description and click the link down in the description to find out more, you'll find out everything you need to know there about this great race. I also want to offer my heartfelt gratitude and thanks for all of the support I've received for this podcast. It was quite an intimidating thing to start. It is just a solo podcast, so it's just me chatting away. And in honesty, I didn't really know how it would be received. But the support I've received already is huge. Everyone who's rated the podcast and left a review, I'm really grateful for you. And it's given me the confidence to continue. And it's really, although it's a solo podcast, it's really my ambition to involve you in every way I possibly can. And as part of that, my favorite part of the podcast is at the end, we do some listener questions. You can submit a listener question or a topic you want to discuss in the description below. There's a little link there and you can leave a voice note and we can come on to that at the end of a future episode. We have some listener questions at the end of this episode, some great topics, so stick around for that. But first, let's talk about dreaming big. Today we're talking about dreaming big, setting big, audacious running goals and the importance of doing so. In the words of Richard Branson, who might not be the only one to have said this, but let's attribute it to him anyway. If your dreams don't scare you, they are too small. So today we're going to talk about 7 things. That is the power of dreaming big, a strategic approach to achieving big goals, overcoming setbacks and building resilience, the role of self-belief and community support, the ripple effect of setting big goals, practical tips for setting and achieving big goals, and finally, the transformative power of dreaming big. But first, as an introduction, I want to talk about embracing ambitious running goals. What if you aimed for a running goal that seemed beyond your current reach? How could that transform your journey? So first, what is dreaming big? Let's start by defining dreaming big. Dreaming big to me is setting ambitious running objectives that push you beyond your comfort zone, beyond what you think you're capable of. They're goals that are so seemingly unattainable that they lead to huge personal growth and resilience. And if you dream big, if you set your sights on something completely beyond your expectations, there are potentially huge benefits that can come from it. So dreaming big and setting goals, setting big, audacious goals, are sort of the same thing. So we'll talk today about both in tandem First comes dreaming big. It is the dream of these big goals. And by doing so, you set those big goals that you first thought were unattainable. So the purpose of the episode is really quite simple. It is for us to explore how setting and pursuing big running goals and dreaming big can lead to profound personal development and achievements that may be completely beyond what you initially expected. So first, the power of dreaming big. The power of dreaming big. There are two things that I think a lot of people mix up and think of in the same way, and that is inspiration and motivation. But in my opinion, they're different. So I've sort of subtitled this inspiration versus motivation. And that's because motivation is a great tool. It's something that is really helpful to get you out the door. It's something that's helpful to have you feeling like you can set these big goals, but it's more in the moment and it can be pretty fleeting. It's not something you can necessarily lean on for a sustained drive. But inspiration comes from big dreams, and it's something deeper. And it's something that can provide this sustained drive. If it's big enough, it can be something you can lean on for a long period of time. So it's really inspiration that we're looking for rather than simple motivation alone. And the real value that comes from this is personal growth. It's something that I'm passionate about. And it's something that I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably passionate about too. And challenging goals demand that you break through mental and physical barriers. We have barriers. We don't really know where they come from necessarily, but they exist. They're ideas about what you're capable of. And usually we're wrong about those things. We're wrong about our limitations and the barriers that we set ourselves. And real ambition is to essentially set new levels of endurance and strength. It's to break through those barriers and see yourself as more capable. And then from that, what comes is a real and genuine belief based on evidence that you are capable of more. And that is what personal growth is. And that all comes from dreaming big. That is the power of dreaming big. If you dream big, if you set audacious goals, then the personal growth that's available to you that comes from that is huge. And so that's the real power that we have available to us by setting these big, audacious goals, by dreaming big. And so to emphasize the power of dreaming big, I want to tell you a little story about a young man from a small village, a quiet, focused runner, who began each day with miles under his feet. And running for him wasn't a dream, not at first. It was simply a way of getting by, of reaching places he needed to go. To get from A to B, he would run, often barefoot, or using whatever tatty shoes that he had available to him. But over time, as he ran further and faster, he began to sense something within himself, a spark, a whisper that spoke of bigger things. As he grew older, he honed his talent, making his mark in races around the world. But winning races alone wasn't enough. Deep down, he was driven by an audacious dream. His dream was something that most people dismissed, an ideal so far out of reach it bordered on the absurd. To run the marathon at a speed scientists and experts said no human could sustain. Impossible, they called it. A physiological wall. But he wasn't daunted. In fact, those doubts only fed his belief. What if, he wondered, that wall was meant to be broken? Determined, he poured everything into his training, pushing himself with a precision and dedication few could imagine. For him, this wasn't just about breaking a record. It was about showing that even the biggest dreams, the ones that seemed unreachable, were worth chasing. To him, this was a dream that would open doors for all dreamers, a chance to reveal a boundlessness in the human spirit. And then came the day. As the world held its breath, he began his second attempt towards that invisible barrier, moving with a calm intensity. Mile after mile, he carried his dream in each stride, shattering assumptions with every step. And as he crossed that finish line, stopping the clock at an astounding 1:59:40, he proved that dreaming big wasn't just about defying limits. It was about rewriting them, defining what humans could achieve. His name, of course, if you didn't get it already, was Eliud Kipchoge. And his dream, once a distant, unthinkable vision, became a new reality for the world to believe it. This, of course, is an extreme example, an example that you might think isn't really relatable, but although you and I are not professional marathon runners, we can learn a huge amount from the GOAT himself. And we know from him that it is his intention to have you believe that no human is limited. It is by setting audacious, big goals, by first dreaming big, that we can achieve things we once thought impossible. And that is the power of first dreaming big. So now I want to talk about a strategic approach to achieving big goals. A strategic approach to achieving big goals. So when we set these big goals, of course, they're going to seem completely unattainable, out of reach. And so it's important to break down that dream. It's important to divide a large goal into manageable steps. We need to reverse engineer it. How do we get there? How long will it take? What do we need to achieve before we can achieve this big goal? So there's all sorts of little attainable goals on the way to achieving this big, audacious dream of ours. And there's plenty of things that we can break down, whether it's weekly mileage or even just specific training sessions, but it drives us. Setting that big goal can drive us. We know where we're going. We know why we're trying to achieve these smaller goals on the path to achieving that big goal. And this requires consistency and patience. Consistency and patience. Achieving ambitious goals really requires a sustained effort and a willingness to embrace the process. I always talk about embracing the process. It is the process that is more important than the goals themselves. And when we dream big, we give ourselves something that can last a long time. If the goal's big enough, it will take a long time with milestones along the way. And that's a good thing. It's good to set these big, audacious goals, to dream big, to look long into the future. Because that's what drives us day to day. When we have something to anchor what we're doing and why we're doing it, then turning up, showing up, achieving the smaller goals on the path to the bigger dream becomes just as important. So it requires consistency and patience along the way. And that's only possible when we know exactly where we're going. And so those big goals, achieving those big goals, setting them long further into the future is really helpful for when we are just turning up on a Monday morning and getting our shoes on and going out the door. We know why we're doing it. We know what it's leading towards. And it's really important to have that big goal in mind so that we turn up. And it helps us. That inspiration helps to get us out the door. And it's not just a fleeting motivation. It's guided by an inspiration that's much bigger than us. And then practically on the point of taking a strategic approach to achieving these big goals, tracking progress is going to be really important. I want to encourage you to use Strava, use some sort of training log, track the progress and monitor the improvements to stay motivated throughout your process. This can be a really great tool. I know that a lot of you will be using Strava or using some sort of tracking device. And as much as the data can sort of get in our head too much, it is a really helpful tool to guide us and let us know where we are on the path to those bigger goals. So make sure you are tracking your progress, you're being strategic about what you're doing, and make sure you know where you're at and you know what the next steps are therefore, because you know how far off that goal you are. So break down that dream, make sure to stay consistent and patient, and track your progress. Okay, the third point, overcoming setbacks and building resilience. Overcoming setbacks and building resilience. I want to normalize the challenges that we face along the way. Setbacks are really a natural part of pursuing big goals, and importantly, they can serve as learning opportunities. We need to see these setbacks as opportunities. Whether it's getting ill, whether it's something happening that gets in the way of your training, we need to see them as opportunities, as learning opportunities, and things that can teach us about ourselves, teach us about where we're weak, where we have weaknesses. I've always thought about injuries, for example, as a weakness discovered. You have the opportunity when you find a weakness, when you get injured, to turn that weakness into a strength. To sort of hammer this home, I want to talk about an example of my own. My first 100k ultramarathon, Val d'Aran by UTMB in the Spanish Pyrenees. I was in the final 6 kilometers probably, and there was a big downhill. And I had done over 100 kilometers already. I was absolutely shattered. And on this downhill, my core was completely jacked up. I had no strength in my core, and it was difficult to say the least. As I came down that hill, I could hear a bell being run at the finish line. Every finisher that was going across the finish line would ring a bell, and it echoed across the mountain range I was in, echoed through the valley, and I could hear it. It felt like it was 30 seconds away, but it was a good half an hour to the end. And I just was kicking myself by how weak I was in my core. My core strength was so non-existent. I was so jacked up in my core that I couldn't even take a confident step forward. And that was a learning experience for me. And now I sort of promised myself at that point that I would strengthen that core. And now, after a lot of training, after that experience, after a weakness discovered, I turned that weakness into a strength. And now I really believe that my downhill, my core strength, is actually a strength of mine. At least I'm certainly stronger in that department. And it was because of that experience. It was because of that slight setback in my race performance that I turned it into a strength. So view these setbacks, these challenges that we are inevitably going to face in the process of getting to your big goals as opportunities, as learning opportunities, as something that you can use to act on. And it's a chance for you to develop resilience. It's important when we experience these setbacks to maintain focus and determination in the face of these obstacles. The goal never changes. The goal you have, the goal you've set, that big ambitious goal that you've set, that doesn't change. But it's inevitable that you'll face setbacks along the way. It's normal to face these challenges. So whilst the goal doesn't change, the path to get there might. In fact, the path to get there will change. How you're approaching these goals, what you're faced to overcome, the obstacles you face on the path to achieving those goals will change how you need to approach the next step. So that might mean adjusting your training plans. It might mean seeking support from others. It might mean cross-training, becoming a better swimmer to make sure that you're maintaining your fitness. It's all part of the journey. And if we want to get to achieve the dream enough, if we want to get to that dream, if that goal is important enough to us, we can see these challenges as just a simple part of the journey and a challenge, an exciting new challenge to face. So I want to offer you a mindset shift. I want to encourage you to view these setbacks as an integral part of the journey. And it's a really important contributing factor to that personal growth and resilience required to get to those huge goals that you've set yourself. So, overcoming setbacks and building resilience. Let's normalize the challenges. They're a normal part of the process. Let's change how we view those setbacks, turn them into a strength, develop resilience, maintain focus and determination in the face of these obstacles. View these challenges as a simple part of the journey and shift your mindset. These goals are big enough and important enough to you that the setbacks really can just be seen as part of the process, and they're a contributing factor to personal growth and resilience. So now in point 4, I want to talk about the role of self-belief and community support. This is something that is really so important, cultivating self-belief. It's fundamental that you believe in your ability to achieve ambitious goals. It's fundamental because it's the first step in taking action. We all know someone who doesn't believe they're capable. Usually that person doesn't take action. They don't take that first step because they don't believe that they can get to that end goal. The easy option is to not believe in yourself. The easy option is to think, I could never do that. That's not me. And so you never take action. You never view yourself as capable. You never have that belief in yourself, because if you did believe in yourself, then that would demand that you take action. So step 1 is to cultivate unstoppable self-belief. And once you have it, once you have that self-belief, you start taking action. And funny enough, that action leads to evidence, and that evidence provides more self-belief, which leads to more action, and so on. But it all starts with self-belief. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you are capable of achieving these audacious goals. And once you do, once you believe in yourself, then you might start taking action. And that action gives you evidence, and that evidence leads to more self-belief and more action. And leverage community support. There's huge benefits in sharing these goals with supportive networks, whether it's your friends, your family, could be your running group or online communities, because this accountability and encouragement really helps you to take action. It helps you to put something on the line, I guess. And so leverage that. Make sure that you're using the people around you to apply pressure on yourself. This is a really powerful thing that you can do. This accountability, sharing what you're trying to do. Don't be scared to share what you're trying to do. If you're scared to share, you're ultimately just scared of failure. But failure along the way, setbacks along the way, is, as we've discussed, just part of the process. So leverage that community. And make sure you're leaning on a supportive community. There's plenty of people out there who will have your back, who will support you, who will believe in you. That really helps also to help you believe in yourself. When you have supportive people around you, then you can start, that sort of starts rubbing off on you. You know, you can use their belief in you to believe in yourself. And then you start taking action because they're counting on it, you're counting on it. And from that action, as we said, you get evidence, and that cyclical process gets started. If you don't have a supportive community around you, I really encourage you to look for it. Seek out people around you who can be a sort of shoulder to lean on, someone who can lift you up when you're down, and someone you can do the same for. Leverage that community support. And look for people who share similar goals to you. Those shared experiences are really important. They can kind of help you to connect with others who are pursuing similar goals, and it can provide good motivation and inspiration and also valuable insights. Some people who have achieved goals you're trying to achieve yourself, they can give you practical insights. They can encourage you. They can tell you how normal it is to face the obstacles that you're currently facing. All of that, leveraging community support and sharing experiences, can help to cultivate self-belief and belief in each other. And that's a huge, important thing on your road to achieving these big goals. So the role of self-belief and community support is super important. Cultivate self-belief. Make sure you try and encourage yourself to believe in yourself. Leverage community support and look for shared experiences. Look for insights and motivation from other people. None of this can be done alone. The 5th point, the ripple effect of pursuing big goals. the ripple effect of pursuing big goals. When you set out to achieve big goals, when you dream big and you think about the unachievable, in inverted commas, this can lead to unexpected opportunities. If you are striving for significant achievements, this can lead to new experiences, new relationships, and also personal growth beyond just running. You may not really realize it, but, well, maybe you do. But running, to me at least, has always been something that has just represented sort of an extension to my own attitude towards other things in life. And when you aim high, when you set audacious goals, you take action. If you believe in yourself, you take action, and you sort of expose yourself to environments and experiences and relationships with others that you never saw coming. So the first ripple effect of pursuing these big goals is these unexpected opportunities that could come from it. And so you should be excited about that. There's so much that can come from setting these big goals, pursuing these big goals, that you need to be ready for. And holistic development, the discipline and resilience that you can develop through pursuing these big running goals, can massively positively impact other areas of your life. It gives you the self-belief, it gives you the evidence, it helps you to dream big in other areas of your life. And this is all round a positive thing for your own personal holistic development. And that's why I believe running has such great power. It might be just a simple thing. It might be just one foot in front of the other. But in the pursuit of these big goals in running alone, you can see huge development in your life outside of running. And inspiring others, the ripple effect of pursuing big goals and inspiring others. Achieving big goals can also serve as inspiration for others to pursue their own dreams. That's an admirable thing. It might be just a small impact. Maybe a sibling of yours has been struggling with their weight, has been struggling to believe in themselves. You could be that inspiration for them. You could be the inspiration for your friend, for anyone in your family. It's an admirable thing to pursue your own goals, because you might not realize, but you can be a bit of a role model in some ways. You don't have to shout about it on social media like I do. You don't have to show everyone what you're doing, but just being an example is something that can have a hugely positive ripple effect. So the ripple effect of pursuing these big goals is huge as well. There's unexpected opportunities ahead. There's huge holistic development for yourself. And there is the very real potential of inspiring others around you in a positive way. And so now I just want to talk about some practical tips for setting and achieving big running goals. Practical tips for setting and achieving big running goals. I've spoken about this before in a previous newsletter, and I think I will do an episode on all of this, on defining your why. I really want to encourage you to identify the deeper motivation behind the goal, because this is something that can help you to maintain that focus and commitment. If you don't really know why you're trying to achieve these big goals, or if your reasons aren't deep enough and real enough for you, then you may struggle on your path to achieving them. So setting these goals is one thing. There is value, of course, in setting these big goals and dreaming big. But it's first important to make sure that those goals align with your why. They align with your values, and they're important to you. So I want to encourage you to identify and define your why. It's going to be different for every person, but make sure you really meditate on this point. Make sure you really think about why you're doing it, what's important to you. Why do you want to do these big things, these big goals? For me, it's always been just the fact that I currently can. And there's also somewhat a fear of regret. If I look back when I'm no longer capable to do these things, will I look back and regret not trying? Potentially. That's a fear I have. And I know that there are so many people out there who can't. They're not capable of doing these things for whatever reason. Health conditions. Maybe they're simply not in a position to be able to run at all. And that's something that drives me. That just the sheer fact that I can do these things is something that drives me to aim high and go for these big goals. And so that's something that's important to me and keeps driving me every day. And it helps me maintain focus and commitment in my pursuit. Set incremental milestones. I want you to establish smaller, more achievable targets. We're talking today, of course, about dreaming big, these big goals, long-term goals. We could be thinking about goals a decade in the future. But we spoke previously about kind of reverse engineering it and making sure that we're setting achievable targets. So that's a really important part. It's a really important practical step, practical tip for setting and achieving big running goals, is to set more achievable targets that lead towards that larger goal. And it provides like a sense of progress. If you set that big goal, a byproduct of that on your journey is achieving smaller goals. And these milestones are important, and it's important to really celebrate those milestones too. So make sure you're setting these incremental milestones and celebrating that progress. Acknowledge and celebrate these achievements along the way. I want you to make sure that you're giving yourself a pat on the back when you achieve those smaller goals. They may not be the big grand goal that you're aiming for long into the future, but setting and achieving smaller goals are completely worth celebrating. So make sure you celebrate throughout. And embrace the journey. I want you to find joy in the process of growth and learning, rather than just solely focusing on this end result and seeing everything else as unimportant. I want you to find joy in the process. This growth, this development that you're experiencing is huge. And it's the core reason why we do this. Really, the dreams, the goals in the future, they're great to have. They're inspiring, they're motivating, they're something that drives you every day. But what's more important is that you make sure you find joy in that process of growth and development as you go. So there's some practical tips for setting and achieving big running goals. Define your why, set incremental milestones, celebrate progress, and embrace the journey. So we've spoken about the power of dreaming big. We used the example of Eliud Kipchoge as a young kid, dreaming big and dreaming of something more than just winning races, and actually setting a massive milestone for the human race of 2 hours in the marathon distance. That power is huge. We've spoken about the strategic approach to achieving those goals, reverse engineering it, breaking down the dream, being consistent and patient, tracking the progress. We've spoken about overcoming setbacks and building resilience. We need to normalize the fact that you will encounter challenges. It's a part of the process. Use those challenges. If you encounter an injury, that's a weakness discovered. Develop resilience throughout the process to maintain focus and determination in the face of obstacles. And shift your mindset and see it as a contributing factor to personal growth and resilience. We've spoken about the role of self-belief and community support. Cultivate this self-belief. Make sure that you first believe that you can. Because without first believing that you can, you won't take action. But once you believe in yourself, once you cultivate this self-belief, you'll take action. You'll give yourself evidence. You'll have more self-belief from that. And you'll take more action from that. Leverage community support. Make sure you're sharing your goals with supportive networks around you, with your run clubs, with online communities for accountability and encouragement. And share these experiences with others. Make sure to seek out others who have achieved these goals, gain tips from them and accountability. And we've also spoken about the ripple effect of pursuing big goals, the unexpected opportunities that could come your way, the holistic development that you should expect from chasing these big running goals. It's more than just your running. It can positively impact other areas of your life, and it can inspire others. What an admirable thing to be doing, to inspire others around you, to develop personally, to improve, to grow. And then some practical tips for setting and achieving big running goals. Define your why, set incremental milestones, celebrate the progress, and embrace the journey. So to conclude, I just want to talk about the transformative power of dreaming big. Running is a great tool that we have at our disposal. It's something that is accessible. It's something you might be doing right now. You're working on yourself. And it's something that quite clearly we can set big aspirational goals within. And that can have transformative effects on your life overall. It can develop you, it can grow you, it can demand resilience from you, and it can serve as real inspiration, both personal inspiration and inspiration to others. This is massive transformative power that dreaming big has. And I want you to reflect on your own running aspirations currently. And I want you to consider setting a goal that really challenges you, that intimidates you, that you're scared of. Dream big. Once you've dreamt big, dream even bigger. It's important that we recognize that even your first thought of what a big goal is could be too small. If it's not scary enough, if it's not intimidating enough, it may be that it's not big enough. So I really want you to look far into the future. Think about where you can really take this. Feel inspired by your own thoughts, your own dreams. Because why not? Why not dream big? Why not have huge aspirations with your running? If you're feeling like you're in a bit of a funk, like you aren't feeling very motivated, you're not feeling very inspired, sit down with yourself and consider setting a goal that really challenges you to dream big. And just as a final thought, remember, the journey towards a big dream is as valuable as the achievement itself. Embrace the challenge and discover the strength within you. These goals are great. They feel amazing to achieve. But what's so important is the fact that you're setting them, the fact that you are dreaming big. There are so many people right now who aren't dreaming. They feel down and out. They're not setting big goals for themselves. They're not challenging themselves. They're not feeling inspired. And that might be you. So the first step I want to encourage you to take is to think hard about what dreams are important to you, what goals you really, truly, deeply want to achieve, and start setting them. Start believing that you can, start taking action, and transform your whole experience on this running journey you're on. We've reached that part of the episode that is listener questions. I love this part. We have 5 listener questions for you this week. And if you want to get involved, if you want to submit your own, go to the description below. There's a little link there and you can submit a voice note and we can feature it in a future episode. So, the first question is from Harry.
Hi Tommy, Harry here. I actually ran the Lone Wolf alongside you last weekend, and I think just under a week post-race, I'm all back to normal. It's given me a chance to reflect upon that race, and on that day, I think my limiting factor was muscular endurance. So my question is, will that improve, or will my muscular endurance increase with time on feet, or do you think I need to change up something in my strength routine to make sure that that isn't a factor, or at least it's less of a limiting factor in future races? I just want to say huge congratulations for that race. It was an amazing feat what you did, let alone to run that last lap in 28 minutes. That's incomprehensible to me after doing enough of those laps to know the incline. But I just wanted to say huge congratulations on the podcast. It's an amazing resource and I can't wait to hear what happens in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks for the question. Thanks for all the support, and congratulations on your lone wolf attempt. The great thing about that race is that you can approach it however you want, and everything's a win when it comes to a race like that that's so personal and such an individual effort. So well done on getting around the course as many times as you did. It was a tough course, a lot of elevation, and if you think that muscular endurance was a limiting factor for you, then I have good news for you, and that is there's quite a simple thing to do to build that endurance, and that is time on feet. So building muscular endurance does just take time, and it takes a lot of time on the feet, and doing these sorts of long races will help with that. I think outside of what you've already sort of suggested for yourself, I'd say that it's important not to just accumulate volume, although that is important. Accumulating volume over time is really important, and that will be a huge factor to your success, but also making sure you're going on these longer runs. There's real benefit in making sure you're going on long runs, because the second half of that run, when you're fatigued, is going to build a huge amount of endurance for you. So when you're training for these bigger races, one practical tip I would give is just ensuring that you are putting in your training plan on a weekly basis one long run that's a lot longer than the rest of your runs throughout the week. Your long runs should only ever get to about a third of your total weekly volume. So get to a point where you have such volume that your long run will be, a third of your total weekly volume. So that could be that your volume gets to a point where, let's say it's sort of 80 kilometers, then your long run would be somewhere around the 30 or 20 to 30 kilometer mark. Ultimately, it's not always going to be possible to do that. So sometimes you might want to double up, for example, on a weekend and do 2 sort of medium runs. But running on sort of fatigued legs and making sure you're getting a lot of volume on longer runs and doubled up runs is going to be a really important factor. And then second to that, as I always advocate for, is strength training. The best way to target muscles that you might not be targeting when you're running is to get in the gym and do that within the gym environment. And so, yeah, those 2 things are going to really help. And just make sure on top of that, you're just being patient with the process. Accumulated volume is really where the magic happens. And so just having like a short training period to train for something really quite as challenging as lone wolf, for example, won't be enough. But giving yourself as much time as possible to accumulate as much volume as possible and doing a lot of long runs and doing a lot of time in the gym is going to be massive if you're looking to do more of these ultras and go further. I hope that helps. Quite simple, really, but increase your volume, get in the gym, and make sure you're doing a lot of long runs. Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, Tommy, it's Farah from Sydney, Australia. Just wanted to tell you, really loving your podcast. In terms of my question, I have plantar fasciitis, and I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. And I noticed in your episode, episode number 5, you were talking to Dean about shin splints, and you mentioned minimalist shoes. I was just wondering, can someone who has plantar fasciitis build to wearing minimal shoes? Because right now I'm wearing stability shoes, and sometimes it's really hard to find stability shoes, and I really want to get rid of this issue that I'm having. So I am doing strength training, but can I also start building my muscles with minimalist shoes? Thanks heaps.
Thanks, Farah. Appreciate the question. And it's a bit of a contentious one, really. I am going to approach answering this question with caution. I'll do a whole episode on barefoot shoes and the value and dangers of these shoes. But I want to say first that you should seek professional help, of course. Always go and see a healthcare professional and get their opinion on it. However, they will often give you the advice to wear cushioned shoes. Well, first, maybe let's talk about what plantar fasciitis actually is. So plantar fasciitis it's an issue actually that more commonly sedentary people face, but is something that a lot of runners can face. And it's when there's damage of the ligament, the plantar fascia, running along the bottom of your foot. It connects your heel bone to your toes, and that can tear and become inflamed. How it manifests is like heel pain usually, and can be really sensitive to the touch. And it's usually because there's weakness in those connective tissues. Interestingly, barefoot shoes can be something that can be used to strengthen your feet. So although it's often recommended that you use shoes that are supportive and cushioned and squeeze your foot into these sort of cast-like narrow shoes, that's not going to demand that much of your feet. So you're not going to be working the muscles required for your foot to be functioning properly. So these shoes, whether they're kind of Vivo barefoot shoes or any other minimal brand out there, they're wide, they're thin, they're flexible, and there's a lot of evidence emerging that it can actually really help to strengthen your feet. Aside from the evidence itself, it's pretty common sense that if your foot is if there's more demanded of your foot, then it's going to strengthen those feet. So it can be a really useful tool. But I want to make sure I emphasize how cautious you should be with these shoes. Don't just purchase these shoes and then suddenly do everything in them. If your plantar fasciitis is bad enough that you can't even sort of stand without cushioning underneath your feet, you may want to fade into it. Maybe use these barefoot shoes in the gym, maybe use them sort of walking around before you run in them. But yes, I think my opinion is that they can be very helpful as part of your rotation to strengthen the foot itself. And what you will need to do to get rid of this plantar fasciitis is to strengthen your feet. And you can't really do that as well if you have highly cushioned, massive offsetted shoes like you would traditionally buy, or massive supported shoes. So make sure you're being cautious. I do believe that you can gain huge benefit from these minimal shoes and having that part of your rotation. They will strengthen your feet, which is going to be a crucial part to helping with your plantar fasciitis. But again, I will emphasize, make sure you consult with a healthcare professional and approach it as cautiously as you possibly can. I hope that gives a bit of a short answer. I will do a whole episode on barefoot shoes and the benefits and dangers of them, and we'll go into the evidence that's out there about barefoot minimal shoes. But my short answer is yes, it could possibly help, but the more nuanced answer is that you should be cautious about just whacking on these shoes because they will demand a lot of your feet, they'll demand a lot of your calves, and I don't want you just suddenly going out and running long distances in these barefoot shoes. Make sure to be cautious, but do consider it as a possible tool. Thanks, Farah.
Hi Tommy, Simon here. Absolutely love your podcast and thanks for all the inspiring work you do. I have a quick question about splits. For example, in a 10k race, should you use the first 5k as a warm-up for the last 5k, or should you gun it in the first 5k and relax in the second 5k? I'm not sure what's the best strategy. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Simon. It's a difficult one to know what the best strategy is, but with a sort of shorter medium distance like 10k, it really depends what level you're at. Obviously, if you're just trying to complete the 10k, this might not be as much of a consideration, but I would generally say that for a 10k you want to get what's called a negative split. So that is that the first half is slower than the second half. The main reason for that is that you want to be in control of that second half, and you want to make sure you're preserving energy to really kick it at the end. The worst thing is to gun it in the first half and then to not be in control of your pace, to completely sort of burn out and hit a wall, and then the race is more in control of your pacing than you are. So my advice personally would be to go a bit easier in the first 5k and then go for it in the second 5k if you're talking about a 10k race. So speeding up throughout is going to be my advice for this. And that takes a lot of practice. It might mean that you do some simulation in your training. If you do some progression runs, which is where you sort of run faster throughout your run and you know what it feels like to speed up, then that could be helpful. But generally, I would say that a negative split in a 10k is a well-executed 10k, and it's going to get harder, obviously, throughout the race. So you want to make sure that you really sort of grit your teeth and push hard in the second half. But if you can, I would try and go for a negative split. You'll usually get a better time if you're going slightly easier in the first half, preserving that energy, and then going for it in the second half. It does require more discipline and patience, but usually it results in a faster time and a more satisfying race overall. You can kind of reduce the risk of hitting that wall. You can optimize your performance by your body sort of responds to the intensity over time. So if you ease into the race and gradually increase your pace, it can help your muscles and cardiovascular system adjust to the sort of increasing demands. And that enhances the efficiency as you move into the race. It's also good for kind of like a psychological boost. When you're halfway through a race, running faster in the second half can give you like a mental edge, and you can kind of pass other runners who may be slowing down. And it's a real confidence boost, and it might make you sort of feel like you're doing better. And that's really helpful. That psychological boost is really helpful in your performance. All sorts of benefits to a negative split. But I would say my advice for a 10K is to try and negative split it rather than going out hard uncontrollably and then hitting a wall in the second half and letting the race control your pace. Hope that helps. Thanks for the question.
Hey Tommy, Scott dialing in from Singapore. I want to both challenge and question you. One of your mantras is run the runnable. And I've always been thought as an ultra runner that you shouldn't run at the beginning what you can't run at the end of the race. So that's the challenge. And the question is, how do you think about pacing in ultras? And I suppose running in general might be marathons. So what's your philosophy around pacing? And are you sprinting up that first hill at the beginning of a 100-mile ultra? Keep up the great work, mate.
Thanks, Scott. Scott's an old colleague of mine, a good friend, and a beast of an ultra runner, and host of the Endurance Asia podcast as well, so go check that out. Good question and good challenge. So, run the runnable. If you can run something at the beginning of a race, should you be running it if it's runnable? Well, it's a good point. Well, I think one of the best tips I heard about pacing when it comes to ultra marathons is ultra marathon running isn't about who can run the fastest. It's about who can slow down the least. And so I've sort of taken that as a great mantra for myself. I definitely would not be running up the first hill. I always think to preserve when it comes to your energy, and really anything can happen in an ultra. So the first half of your ultra marathon, or even the first 3/4 of your ultra marathon, should be focused on preserving energy and making sure you're fueling right. So I guess my approach to pacing is to take it easy, get rid of the ego at the start. I remember the last ultra I did, the last like mountain ultra, Mozart 100. I was walking up all the uphills, walking with some pace, but walking up all the uphills, and there were a lot of people passing me and running the first uphills. Sure enough, I overtook every single one of them eventually because they weren't preserving energy, and I believe I was. And I think that goes to show that if you're patient with your pacing, then you can be more in control. Similar to the previous question, it's in my eyes about control over your pacing and making sure that you have something in the tank for later on in the race, because ultras really take everything from you, and you need to have something in the back pocket when you're coming towards the end, so that you have some control and you don't let the race control you completely. But I think I would say on run the runnable really came from when you're really tired in a race and you don't believe you can run anymore, at least you don't want to run anymore. There will be runnable sections that don't take too much energy, but you can still run them. And so I would always tell myself to run the runnable. So if there's a flat section, no matter what, I'm going to break into a little run, because you are more capable than you think, and it's not going to take too much energy from you. But I would certainly say that at the start of the race, if there are these uphills, you might have the energy at the time, but you want to preserve that for later on in the race. So preservation of energy is probably my strategy towards pacing. And especially when it comes to ultras, you want to make sure you spread the energy you have across the whole race, rather than using it all in the start and completely bonking and potentially DNFing. That would be my short answer, and I hope it's satisfactory for you, Scott. Thanks for the question. Okay, we have one more question. This one's from Thady.
Hey, Tommy. Tady Cohen here from Ireland. Quick question for you. I've been training, I suppose, strength training and short distance running, sort of 5-10 Ks for a number of years now, and I'd have quite a high level of fitness. But I'd like to move into the more kind of longer distance running, and I suppose just from a starting point in order to build out a program, what's the best way to go about it? Should I go for a run at level 2 and just keep going for as long as I possibly can to find out where my base level is, or should I start a program, say, that begins at 10 kilometers and build it up that way? Thanks.
Thanks, Dady. Great question. So I think the common mistake that people make is just increasing the distance of each run. So you might max out at sort of 10K, and then you might think, okay, I'm going to try and go further than that, and so I'm going to do a 12K today, and then the next day you do a 15K, and you just push like that. That's not a very sustainable way of doing it, and what's more important is that you accumulate a lot of volume over a long period of time. So I want to just encourage you to form a good habit of a high frequency of runs. So increase the number of times you're running each week and accumulate that volume very easily. So it might be that you run 4K each time, but really easy, but you're accumulating a lot of volume. This is low demand on the body, but it allows a lot of time between your runs to heal and build that endurance in the right way. Then eventually you'll get to a point where you can implement longer runs, but still always at an easy base building pace and not demanding too much of the body. Eventually, over weeks and weeks of doing this, of building a foundation and a base, you can start throwing in a slightly longer run, and that might look like throwing in a 15K or going by time on the feet instead of distance. So I think just my short answer would be to make sure you're building that base. You've got a lot of foundation to build on, and then you can throw in something longer, and your body will be ready at that point to increase the distance. But don't just go out and sort of find out what you're capable of now. Just build that volume over time, and then you will be capable of a longer distance in your run. You will then be capable of throwing in a longer distance, and you might surprise yourself. I would also want to encourage you to sort of consider time on the feet over distance. Distance is obviously a great milestone and goal to aim for, but if you can aim for time on the feet, you might approach that run a little bit differently. You might ease up a lot more, and it's time on the feet that really matters and builds that muscular endurance like we had in the first question here. So frequency, volume, and then increasing distance of each and intensity and really pushing yourself. But first, make sure you're building that foundational volume so that your body is ready to increase the distance. Hope that helps, man, and really appreciate the question. Thanks to everyone who asked a question this week. Thanks to Harry, Farah, Simon, Scott, Thady. Really appreciate your questions. We'll have more next week, and if you want to get involved and submit your own question, then in the description below you'll be able to find a link there, and you can just send in a voice note and we'll feature it in a future episode. As many of you will know, I recently quit my job to go full-time on this to help motivate, educate and inspire people to get out the door and go for a run. That, of course, comes with its own risks. I'm doing this all alone and funding it myself. To give you some insight on how it usually works on the inside, on a lot of podcasts, usually an agency or a management team will come in and strike random deals with brands, so random adverts can be thrown at you. I'm actually going to be doing all of this myself, and so I'm hoping to establish partnerships with brands I care about, so I can authentically recommend brands I actually love and use to you. There are, however, costs associated with running a podcast, subscriptions to tech that make it all possible. So if you like what we're building here, and if you wanted to support me in a small way financially, you can buy me a coffee, which will actually go towards covering costs on the podcast. I've left a little link below if you did want to do that. There's, of course, absolutely no pressure at all, and I appreciate all the support that's coming my way. It really means a lot to me that you even listen and share the podcast. What's more valuable to me is that you gain something from the content itself, and you can apply it to your own training in your own life. But if you wanted to support the podcast in that way, the option is there for you, and it would mean a lot to me. That's it for this episode. If you're still out running, keep going, keep tapping away. If you want to learn more about Devil's Gulch, my first 100 miler, there's a link in the description. If you've enjoyed the pod and you think it deserves a solid rating, feel free to leave one, leave a review, leave a comment, share the podcast with your mates, and most importantly, run the runnable. Keep showing up for yourself. Much love, and I'll see you next time.